Okay, let's dive in. It's June, Pride Month is here, you see rainbows everywhere, and, that always brings up these really important questions about companies and their support for the LGBTQ plus community.
Right.
They put out statements, change logos, but how much of it is real?
Hmm.
Is it genuine allyship or something else entirely?
It's such a crucial distinction to make, especially now, and that's exactly what we're tackling today using the source material you brought to us, that piece from the Urban Herald, LGBTQ plus friendly companies.
Yeah.
Real allies, not just rainbow washing.
Yeah, you sent that over asking basically what is the difference?
Yeah.
How do you spot a real ally versus just performative support?
Yeah.
So our mission here is to really unpack that article for you, pull out the key takeaways.
Exactly. We'll get into the core ideas like what is rainbow washing? What does genuine support actually look like? We'll look at some recent examples the article mentions, the trends.
And importantly, how you can start to spot the difference yourself.
Yeah, practical takeaways.
Okay, so let's start right there, defining the terms. What does the article say rainbow watching actually is?
So the article frames it as primarily surface level, pretty shallow stuff.
Like just changing a logo.
Yeah, exactly. Slapping a rainbow on products, changing the social media avatar, maybe some decorations, but usually only during Pride Month. The source actually calls it all sizzle, no steak.
Huh.
It's basically a marketing tactic, right? Aimed at tapping into the pink pound or pink dollar, trying to look supportive to attract customers, but without necessarily doing the hard work, the real investment inside the company or for the community.
And the article suggests this isn't just, like, ineffective. It can actually cause harm.
It can, yeah. That's a really interesting point the authors make. They argue that this kind of performative stuff can actually water down the meaning of pride, which, let's remember, started as a protest.
Right. Its roots are in activism.
Exactly. And it can also kind of hide what's really going on inside a company, projecting this image of allyship while maybe having internal policies or a culture that's actually discriminatory.
Okay, so that's the surface level, the rainbow washing. What does the article contrast that with? What does genuine support look like then?
Genuine support, according to the source, is all about depth and consistency. It means walking the talk, but like all year long.
Not just for 30 days in June.
Precisely. It means those public displays, the rainbows, the statements, they're actually backed up by concrete things like solid internal policies protecting LGBTQ plus employees, transparent financial commitments to actual LGBTQ plus
The
organizations.
transparency is key there.
Huge. And consistent engagement with the community, not just, dropping in once a year for the parade.
The article laid out some really clear contrasts. What are some of the biggest red flags it mentions? The things that should make you think, maybe this is just rainbow washing.
Well, that timing thing we just mentioned is a big one. Changing the logo only for June, and then poof, July 1st, it's back to normal.
Yeah, that feels pretty telling.
Or launching those special Pride products, but being really vague about where the money goes. Is a real chunk going to support the community? Or is it just, patting the company's profits under a rainbow flag?
And then there's the really stark contradiction the article points out.
Oh, yeah. Donating to politicians or organizations that are actively working against LGBTQ plus rights, while at the same time running marketing campaigns targeting the queer community. That's a major one.
That's pretty blatant.
Absolutely. And the article also calls out featuring diverse LGBTQ plus faces in ads, which looks great, right? But then having zero openly queer people in senior leadership roles,
Right.
where the actual decisions get made.
So who has the power, really?
Exactly. It raises that question.
So it really feels like that timing element is, it only doing Pride is maybe the easiest first check.
It's definitely a key indicator highlighted in the piece. It contrasts that year-round engagement with consistent messaging of real allies with the only rainbow logos products during Pride Month of rainbow washing.
And the money, too, you mentioned.
Yeah, the financial side. Genuine allies tend to make, substantial, transparent donations. The article throws out a figure like $100 case plus annually as an example of something significant compared to those vague promises of a percentage of proceeds where you never really know the amount or even who gets it.
Let's bring in some of the recent context the article touches on. It mentioned that in 2025, some big names, Meta, Pepsi, Ubisoft, seemed to pull back a bit on the big, visible Pride campaigns. What did the source say was behind that shift?
The article points to a couple of things driving that. One is this sort of growing climate of DEI backlash, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives facing more criticism and political heat.
Right, that's definitely been in the news.
And also Just growing skepticism from consumers themselves. People are getting savvy about performative allyship, and companies might be getting nervous about being called out or just caught in the political crossfire.
And the piece uses the Target situation from 2024 as a really potent example here, kind of cautionary tale. Remind us what the article said happened there.
Yeah, Target ended up facing criticism from, well, pretty much all sides. From anti-LGBTQ plus groups for having pride merchandise, but then also from the LGBTQ plus community and allies for seeming to cave to pressure and not standing firm.
So they got hit from both directions.
Exactly. And the article notes the business impact wasn't trivial. It mentions a 10.5% drop in online sales and definite damage to their reputation. It really shows the tricky line companies are walking and the risks of getting it wrong.
So it really does seem like the conversation is shifting. It's less about who has the shiniest rainbow.
Totally. The article nails this shift. It says the question is moving from who has the brightest logo to who's got the bravest policies. People are looking for substance, for courage, not just colorful marketing.
Okay, so let's talk about that substance.
Hmm?
Moving beyond just avoiding the bad signs,
Hmm.
what does the article identify as the concrete, positive actions of a company that's genuinely supportive? What does real allyship actually look like in practice?
So the article breaks it down into a few key areas. First, as we've said, that consistent year-round thing, it's not seasonal.
Right.
Then it's about having really robust internal policies, not just saying we don't discriminate, but policies that actively protect, support, and uplift their LGBTQ plus employees.
And that gets into tangible benefits, doesn't it? Not just words on paper.
Absolutely. The source really emphasizes the importance of inclusive benefits. Things like making sure healthcare covers transgender-specific needs, offering support for surrogacy or adoption for all kinds of families, having parental leave policies that are genuinely fair regardless of family structure.
That makes sense. Real-world impact.
Exactly. Then there's the transparent financial support we talked about, giving real money to legitimate LGBTQ plus groups, doing advocacy or providing services, and also public advocacy, standing up for LGBTQ plus rights publicly, even when it might be unpopular or difficult.
That takes courage.
It does. And finally, the article stresses genuinely involving the community, not just using LGBTQ plus people as marketing props, but actually bringing their voices into the planning and execution of initiatives, co-creation, not just representation.
There was that quote in the piece that really stuck with me. We're queer all year long, not just for 30 days during Pride Month.
Yeah, that sums it up perfectly, doesn't it? It challenges that whole idea that support can be switched on and off like a holiday decoration.
Okay, so for you listening, how do you actually take all this information from the article and use it? How do you start trying to separate the real allies from the washers? What's the checklist?
The article gives some really practical steps. First, look inside the company. Check out their actual policies. Do their non-discrimination statements explicitly name sexual orientation and gender identity? That's kind of table stakes now, but you still need to check.
Don't assume it's there.
Right. Then dig into those benefits. Is the healthcare truly inclusive for trans folks? What about family building support, adoption, surrogacy? Is parental leave equal for everyone?
And what about internal groups?
Yeah, do they have active employee resource groups or ERGs for LGBTQ plus staff? Are these groups actually supported by the company? Do they have influence? Also, look for signs of regular, meaningful diversity and inclusion training that specifically covers LGBTQ plus topics. And see if they're transparent with their diversity data. Do they publish reports showing their workforce makeup?
Okay, that's the internal view.
Yeah.
What about looking at their external actions?
Externally, follow the money. Look for that transparent financial support to reputable LGBTQ plus groups. Check if they're taking public stances on important issues or legislation. Are they involved in long-term, authentic partnerships with community organizations or just doing one-off sponsorships for Pride?
And the marketing piece again.
Yeah, look at their ads and representation. Is it authentic, diverse, and importantly, who's making those ads? Who's in leadership? Is there diversity behind the scenes too?
The article also really hammered home the importance of employee voices.
Yeah, this is crucial and maybe harder to find, but so valuable. What are actual LGBTQ plus employees, current or former, saying about the company culture? You can look at sites like Glassdoor, though obviously take reviews with a grain of salt. But do people report feeling safe, respected, valued?
And is leadership visibly supportive?
Huge factor. Do senior leaders openly use their pronouns? Do they show up at ERG events? Do they advocate publicly? That kind of visible support from the top really sets the tone for the whole organization.
The article did give some examples of companies it felt were doing a good job meeting these kinds of criteria. Who did it highlight? Just a few examples.
Sure. It mentioned companies across different sectors. In tech, Apple was noted for its comprehensive policies and benefits. IBM got a mention for being an early adopter of inclusive policies and having extensive transgender health care.
Okay.
In finance, JP Morgan Chase was highlighted for getting a perfect score on a key index and being quite vocal. Retail and apparel had Levi Strauss & Co., known for a long history of advocacy, and Nike, which consistently scores well on inclusion indexes. Adobe was mentioned for an initiative called Adobe for All and being transparent with reporting.
It wasn't just tech and finance, though, right?
No, absolutely not. It pointed to Lend-Lease in construction, also with a perfect score on that index and supporting the Equality Act. Ralph Lauren was noted for support going way back to the 90s and offering gender-neutral clothing lines, and Northwestern Mutual in financial services for its benefits and active ERGs. So yeah, it shows that genuine support isn't limited to one type of industry.
You've mentioned that key index a couple of times. The article leaned heavily on the Human Rights Campaign Foundation's Corporate Equality Index, the CEI. Can you unpack what that actually is?
Yeah, the CEI is basically a big annual scorecard for how U.S. companies are doing on LGBTQ plus workplace equality. It's run by the HRC Foundation, and it rates businesses on things like their non-discrimination policies, whether they offer equitable benefits for LGBTQ plus workers and their families, their support for an inclusive culture, and their corporate social responsibility efforts related to LGBTQ plus issues.
And the article focused on the 2025 results.
Right. The 2025 CEI was notable because it had record participation. Almost 4,450 businesses were rated. That alone shows more companies are engaging with these issues, or at least recognizing they need to be measured.
What were some of the key findings from the 2025 index that the article pulled out?
Well, a really significant milestone was that 98% of the companies rated now include gender identity in their non-discrimination policies. That's huge progress on a fundamental level.
Wow, 98%.
Yeah, really high. The index also saw some new companies hitting that perfect 100 score for the first time. The article specifically mentioned Alcoa, the metals company.
Alcoa. Interesting.
Yeah, and it highlighted why they got that score, pointing to specific things like their Diversitox training, a dedicated LGBTQ plus benefits guide for employees, and even global gender transition guidelines, concrete actions.
So it's not just ticking a box.
Exactly. Rapid7, a cybersecurity company, also got a top score, along with firms like URUP and BCLP. And even big players who weren't quite at 100, like Lenovo hitting 95, their highest score, yet shows movement and progress across the board, even if there's still room to grow for some.
And the article stressed the CEI tries to measure real lived inclusion.
Right. The goal isn't just, do you have this policy written down, but is it actually working? Does it make a difference in the day-to-day experience of your LGBTQ plus employees? That's the aim.
So pulling back to the bigger picture, based on the 2025 landscape described in the article, what are the main trends happening right now in this space? Corporate inclusion for LGBTQ plus folks.
Okay, key trends the article identified. First, that record participation in ratings like the CEI, more companies are in the game. Second, that huge jump in explicit gender identity protections, almost universal now among rated companies.
Okay.
Third, a growing focus on global inclusion companies being pushed to apply these standards not just in the US, but everywhere they operate. Fourth, a really strong theme of year-round accountability being demanded by consumers, by employees, by advocacy groups. People are watching all year.
Makes sense.
Fifth, the increasing power and influence of employee advocacy, especially through those ERGs, driving change from within. Then there's that counter trend we discussed.
The pullback from some brands.
Yeah, some pulling back on visible campaigns because of the backlash. But the article suggests the counterforce to that is that sustained, authentic engagement and brave policy stances are increasingly being rewarded by the market and advocates. It also notes new leaders emerging in different sectors and just generally more transparency becoming available around benefits and policies.
Okay, so bringing it back to you, the listener. You've heard the definitions, the red flags, the positive signs, the context, the benchmarks, the trends. How do you actually use all this information from the source? How can you personally identify and maybe support the businesses that are doing the right thing?
The article offers really concrete advice here. First, do your homework. Go to the company's website, look for their non-discrimination policies, their diversity and inclusion statements, details about their benefits. Is the information easy to find? Is it clear? Do they publish diversity reports?
And really scrutinize those financial ties.
Absolutely critical. The article says, Investigate their political donations. There are watchdog groups out there that track corporate giving, so you can see if a company proclaiming Pride support is also funding anti-LGBTQ plus politicians or causes.
That feels like a direct contradiction.
It is. And look at their charitable giving and partnerships. Who are they giving money to? Are they reputable LGBTQ plus organizations doing real work? Is the amount significant and transparent?
And using those rankings seems like a good tool as well.
For sure. Use resources like the HRC CEI if you're looking at U.S. companies, or check out international equivalents like Stonewall's rankings in the UK or GLAD's work tracking advertising. These indexes do a lot of the legwork for you, providing independent assessments.
And listen to people.
Yes. Read employee reviews on sites like Glassdoor, especially looking for comments from LGBTQ plus employees about the culture. Again, approach with some caution, but it can give you a feel for the lived reality inside the company.
And maybe even just observing when you interact with a company.
Right. Little things can be telling. Do employees use pronouns in email signatures or on badges? Are there gender-neutral restrooms easily available? Is the language they use generally inclusive? These details add up to create an overall climate.
Okay, so let's take a step back for a second. Why is it important, according to the article, for you as an individual consumer or employee to actually do this research and try to support the genuine allies? What's the impact?
The article argues pretty strongly that your choices really do matter. They have power. Where you choose to spend your money, where you decide to work, maybe even where you invest. It all sends signals to the market.
You're voting with your wallet, essentially.
Exactly. When people reward companies that take real substantive action, it creates a powerful incentive for other companies to move beyond just performance and adopt meaningful policies and commitments. It drives demand for genuine change.
And that has broader implications.
It does. Supporting genuine allies helps normalize inclusion. It helps advance LGBTQ plus rights by showing that supporting the community is not just the right thing to do, but can also be good business. It challenges discrimination.
And, of course, it makes a direct difference inside those companies.
Absolutely. When companies build genuinely inclusive workplaces, their LGBTQ plus employees feel safer, more valued, more respected. That allows them to bring their whole selves to work, which is better for them and, honestly, usually better for the company's performance, too. It really comes down to that line from the article.
Actions speak louder than rainbows.
Precisely.
Now, the article was pretty clear that this isn't easy and no company is perfect, even the ones trying hard. What kind of challenges did it mention that even the best-intentioned companies face in this work?
That's a really important point. The article highlights the complexity, especially for global companies. Navigating those huge differences in laws and cultural attitudes towards LGBTQ plus people across different countries is a massive challenge. How do you maintain consistent values globally?
Yeah, that can't be simple.
Not at all. Then there's just the fact that inclusion is, well, it's a journey, not a destination. It requires continuous effort, constantly updating policies, listening to feedback from the community and employees, adapting to new challenges. You can't just set it and forget it.
It's ongoing work.
Always. And finally, the article touches on that tough balance between profit and principle. Sometimes taking a strong stand for LGBTQ plus rights does mean facing backlash, maybe losing some customers, taking a financial hit. The article suggests that true allies are the ones willing to stick to their values even when it's costly or difficult.
Okay, so we've really dug into this source material today. We've unpacked that difference between rainbow washing and genuine, meaningful support. We've looked at the signs, the red flags, the recent shifts, some examples the article praised, and importantly, how you can use this knowledge.
Yeah, I think what really comes through from the article is that figuring out who the real allies are means looking much deeper than the surface symbols, especially those that only appear in June. It's about scrutinizing policies, verifying actions throughout the year, demanding transparency, and really trying to understand the lived experiences of LGBTQ plus employees.
And the landscape is changing. Accountability seems to be rising.
Definitely. And the article credits consumers and employees like you for driving a lot of that increased expectation and scrutiny.
The article wraps up by framing Pride not just as a party, but as a protest, a promise, and a continuing call for progress. And it urges companies to really march alongside the community every single day of the year.
Which leads to a really interesting final thought, especially considering those challenges we just talked about, the global complexities, the need for constant improvement, that profit versus principle tension. What does marching every day actually practically look like for a huge global corporation? And maybe more importantly for you, how can you effectively keep holding them accountable for that commitment long after the pride flags come down?
Something to definitely keep thinking about.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing us this source material for today's deep dive.